Hey everybody, Kate Miller here coming to you on our latest Zoom session. I am joined by my partner in law and in life, Chris Miller. Hey Chris.
Hey guys.
All right, so Chris, we on this session of our Zoom, we are going to be talking about one of the cases that came down from the North Carolina Court of Appeals, came down just this week on June 1st, and it is Craven County Child Support Enforcement on behalf of the mother who had sued the father, Mr. Hageb. And it's a case dealing with child support, obviously, and wanted to know kind of your take on what the Court of Appeals did after this after the trial on this child support case.
Yeah, so Dad, at a hearing for permanent child support, Dad testified that he had two other biological children not a party to this action, and that he was self-employed. And what the court did was found that he had self-employment monthly gross income of about $19,000, and that his tax returns showed significant personal expenses as well as business expenses. And the court only gave him credit for one of the two children that he said lived with him at that time. All right. So Dad appealed. He said the court didn't correctly determine his income and didn't correctly apportion him to other minor kids also living with him. And there's kind of two big points of this. The first one is from the income perspective. As a self-employed person, the guidelines say that to calculate your income, you take your gross receipts and you deduct reasonable and ordinary business expenses. And in this case, the court didn't do any of that. They made a vague reference that his tax returns included personal expenses, but they didn't say what his gross receipts were. They didn't say what his actual deductible business expenses were. And they didn't say on his tax return what his personal expenses were.
So they just sort of and said, here's our number. There you go.
Correct. And the Court of Appeals even said the findings the trial court made were essentially a conclusion, and they didn't provide any of the math to get us to that conclusion. So that issue was remanded back to the trial court to say Dad had gross receipts of X. He had reasonable business expenses of, advertising, payroll, telephone, whatever it may be, of Y, resulting in a gross income of Z.
Got it.
The second issue was that the court only gave him credit for one child. And the court distinguished the two other children not a party to this action by saying that Dad was on the birth certificate for one child, but not the other.
Okay.
And the Court of Appeals says that being on a birth certificate isn't dispositive for whether that is a child for whom you have financial responsibility and can receive credit for that. And so they went through examples of other evidence that can be used to establish paternity. So what the Court of Appeals did in this one is kick it back again to the trial court to say, you've got to provide us with some basis as to why you did, or in this case did not, give Dad credit for this other child. And the only finding was that Dad testified that he was the biological parent of this child. And so if the trial court says we don't find this testimony credible, then that's all we need. But the Court of Appeals says you have to provide some specific basis as to if a child is not going to be credited, why you're not doing that.
That makes sense. Okay. So ultimately we're talking about probably a poorly drafted order that just needs to get added some detail to it. But now all of the parties have to go back to trial, and the trial court has to, kind of redo its order so that it's more clear, and that the Court of Appeals, if it gets appealed again, has some proper findings to base its appeal off of. So thanks for all that, Chris. It's a lesson for all of us as attorneys. Get your orders drafted properly, and for clients, get your testimony lined up and make sure you got all your documents in place. So thanks, Chris.
There you go. You're welcome. Have a good one.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.